What if the way a body is treated after death is not just a ritual, but a statement of belief that echoes into eternity? Sit with that for a moment, because this question is not about fire or earth. It is about trust. It is about whether divine instruction still matters when human logic feels more convenient. Deep down, you already feel the weight of this question. That quiet discomfort you feel is not fear, it is awareness. And if you stay with this until the end, clarity will replace that unease. We live in a time where death is rushed, simplified, made efficient. When someone leaves this world, decisions are made quickly, often without reflection. People say it is practical. They say it is modern. They say it does not matter. But the soul resists that answer because the soul knows that the body was not random. It was formed intentionally, touched by divine will, carried breath that was never its own, and anything shaped by God is never meaningless, even in silence. The body is not just flesh that stopped working. It prayed, it fasted, it bowed, it endured pain, it carried intention. It was the vessel through which choices were made, through which obedience or rebellion was lived. To reduce it to waste is to forget what it held, and forgetting sacred things is how truth slowly fades. Not loudly, quietly. Fire has always meant something more than destruction. In divine language, it is not neutral, it is not casual, it is deliberate. Fire tests, fire separates. Fire consumes what it touches until nothing remains recognizable. That symbolism has never been accidental. When something is burned, it is erased from form, and God is a God of form, order, and purpose. He creates, He preserves, He resurrects. Erasure has never been His language of honor. Some say God looks only at the soul, that the body no longer matters. But if the body did not matter, it would not be resurrected. It would not be questioned. It would not be returned to life. God does not discard what He plans to raise. He does not instruct reverence for something meaningless. Burial is not about the soil. It is about humility. It is the body being returned gently to the place it came from, waiting as commanded, not destroyed as if it were a mistake. This is where the heart tightens, because many followed paths they were told were harmless, because many trusted culture more than command. And God knows this. He sees intention. He judges with justice and mercy. But mercy does not erase truth. It does not redefine order. It covers ignorance, not defiance. Once clarity is given, responsibility begins. And that moment is now. This is not meant to accuse. It is meant to awaken. Because ignoring divine boundaries does not free the soul. It burdens it. Peace does not come from doing what feels easier. It comes from alignment, from knowing that even in death, submission continues, that even when the tongue is silent, the choice still speaks. The discomfort you feel right now is not meant to push you away. It is meant to draw you closer, to pull you back into reverence, to remind you that God is not distant from these details. He is present in them. And honoring His design is not about fear. It is about trust. Trust that He knows what we do not. Trust that His wisdom extends beyond the moment, beyond the grave, beyond what the eyes can see. Stay with that trust, because when truth settles in the heart, confusion loses its grip, and peace begins where obedience is restored. Peace only begins when truth is no longer resisted, and resistance is rarely loud. It hides behind excuses. It hides behind phrases like everyone does it, and God understands. But understanding is not the same as approval. God understands every sin ever committed. That has never made it right. The danger is not in what is misunderstood. The danger is in what is normalized. Once truth reaches you, you are no longer standing in ignorance. You are standing at a crossroads, and crossroads demand movement. Staying still is already a choice. This is where the weight increases, because delayed obedience does not remain neutral. It slowly reshapes belief. What you justify today becomes what you defend tomorrow, and what you defend long enough becomes what you teach others. This is how error spreads quietly, wrapped in comfort. God's order has always been consistent. He forms from dust. He returns to dust, not through force, not through fire, but through submission. Burial is not a cultural habit. It is a divine rhythm, a final act of humility. The body that once stood proudly now rests low, equal to all others, rich or poor, known or forgotten. Every burial whispers the same truth. Nothing created outranks its creator. Fire interrupts that rhythm. It rushes what God designed to wait. It destroys what God intended to preserve. Some argue that God can resurrect anything. That is true. His power is not limited. But obedience has never been about limiting God. It has always been about honoring him. The question is not whether God can restore. The question is whether you were willing to respect his order when it mattered. This is where urgency tightens its grip, because these choices are often made in moments of grief, in chaos, in emotional fog, and once made, they cannot be undone. That is why clarity must come before loss, before panic, before pressure. Waiting until death arrives is waiting too late. Wisdom prepares while the heart is calm, not when it is breaking. There is also something deeper at stake. How a body is treated reflects how life itself is valued. When death is handled casually, life slowly becomes cheap. When the end is rushed, the meaning of the journey fades. Reverence at death protects reverence in life. It reminds the living that actions echo beyond breath. That faith does not stop at the heartbeat. It continues into silence. Some feel uncomfortable hearing this because it challenges family traditions, cultural norms, social expectations. But truth has never survived by being popular. Every divine correction feels heavy at first. It presses against pride. It confronts habit. It forces humility. And humility is the doorway to peace, not the enemy of it. God does not ask for perfection. He asks for alignment. He does not demand knowledge of everything. He demands respect for what is revealed. When instruction is clear, love responds with submission, not fear, not guilt, but trust. Trust that God's wisdom reaches places human reasoning cannot. This moment is not accidental. You are hearing this because responsibility is being placed gently in your hands, not as a burden, but as protection, to guard your choices, to guard your family, to guard the legacy of faith you leave behind. Silence after clarity is no longer innocence. It is delay. And delay carries consequences the heart never anticipates. Let this truth settle, not as pressure, as direction. Let it correct without hardening you. Let it awaken without frightening you, because obedience is not loss. It is safety. It is choosing God's order, even when no one is watching, even when culture disagrees, even when it costs comfort. Faith proves itself most clearly at the end of things. And the end of the body is one of those moments. What you honor there reveals what you believed all along. What you honor at the end reveals what ruled your heart all along. Death strips away performance. There is no audience left to impress, no image to protect. Only truth remains. And truth is never confused about authority. It knows who gives life, and it knows who sets the terms for how life is returned. This is where belief becomes visible, not in words spoken during life, but in decisions made when life is gone. Because the final act toward the body is a declaration. It says whether faith was deep or borrowed, whether obedience was real or selective, whether God was trusted fully or only when it felt comfortable. Many people believe faith is private, something that lives quietly in the heart. But faith always manifests. It shapes choices. It leaves fingerprints, especially at the moment when emotions are raw and pressure is high. That is when belief either stands firm or collapses into convenience. And God sees that moment clearly. There is a reason divine instructions are precise. Not because God is rigid, but because humans are forgetful. We drift. We justify. We slowly bend truth until it fits our lifestyle. Clear commands are anchors. They hold the soul stead. Why, when culture pulls hard in another direction, remove the anchor, and even sincere people drift without noticing. This is not about condemning the past. It is about protecting the future, because every choice teaches something. Children watch. Families remember. Communities imitate. When sacred boundaries are crossed without reflection, confusion spreads quietly. But when reverence is restored, clarity returns just as quietly and far more powerfully. Obedience has always carried a cost. It costs approval. It costs comfort. It costs agreement. But disobedience costs more. It costs peace. It costs confidence before God. It costs alignment. And those losses are rarely felt immediately. They surface later, in moments when the soul is searching for certainty and finds only doubt. This truth demands courage, the courage to stand apart, to say no when everyone expects yes, to choose what is right even when it feels awkward. That courage is not loud. It does not argue. It simply obeys. And obedience speaks louder than defense ever could. God does not measure sincerity by emotion. He measures it by submission. Tears do not replace obedience. Intentions do not override instruction. Love is proven through alignment, not explanation. When God's will is known, love responds with action, not negotiation. This is where transformation begins, not with guilt, not with fear, but with decision. A quiet, firm decision that says, God's order matters more than tradition, more than opinion, more than pressure. That decision reshapes the heart. It strengthens faith. It brings a peace that argument never delivers. The urgency you feel is not manipulation. It is responsibility awakening, because this knowledge changes what is expected of you. Silence now is not neutral. It is delay, and delay hardens over time. But immediate alignment softens the heart and clears the conscience. It restores confidence before God. This is about choosing reverence in a world that rushes everything, choosing patience where others choose speed, choosing humility where others choose control, choosing God's wisdom over human reasoning. These choices do not make life smaller. They make it meaningful. Faith is not proven when it is easy. It is proven when it costs something, when obedience requires standing alone, when honoring God means resisting what feels normal. That is where belief stops being an idea and becomes an identity. Let this settle into action, not tomorrow, not someday, now, because truth does not wait, it calls. And when it calls, it is inviting you into alignment, protection, and peace that only obedience can provide. Alignment is not a feeling, it is a stance. It is the moment the soul stops negotiating and starts submitting. When truth has been revealed this clearly, indecision is no longer harmless. It shapes direction. It determines legacy. And legacy does not begin at death. It is built now, choice by choice, while breath remains. Every generation is tested differently, not always through persecution, often through comfort, through options, through the quiet temptation to soften what God made firm. That is the test of this moment. Not whether faith exists, but whether it governs action. Because belief that never reaches behavior eventually fades into opinion, God's clarity is an act of mercy. He does not leave humanity guessing. He instructs. He warns. He preserves. As order so the soul does not drift into confusion. When that order is ignored, life becomes noisy. Anxiety increases. Confidence before God weakens. Not because God changed, but because alignment was lost. This is why obedience brings peace, even when it costs something, because the soul recognizes when it is standing in truth. There is a quiet strength that follows submission, a steadiness that does not need validation. It does not shout. It does not defend itself. It simply rests in knowing it chose correctly. Many people wait for consensus before they obey. They wait for agreement, for approval, for reassurance. But obedience has never depended on numbers. Truth has never needed permission. Those who wait for comfort before obedience usually never move. And life passes while conviction sleeps. This is not about being harsh. It is about being honest. God's instructions are not suggestions. They are safeguards. They exist to protect faith from erosion. Once erosion begins, it is slow, invisible at first, but eventually foundations weaken. What once felt solid begins to crack under pressure. Choosing God's order restores weight to faith. It makes belief tangible. It turns words into witness. People may not understand it. They may resist it, but they will see it. And seeing consistent obedience challenges hearts more than arguments ever could. The decision to honor God, even in death, sends a message to the living. It says faith does not end when life does. It says God's authority is not seasonal. It says reverence is not selective. That message shapes families. It anchors communities. It preserves truth in generations yet unborn. This is where courage matures, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that acts without applause, that chooses alignment even when misunderstood, that trusts God's wisdom more than human logic. That courage does not fade, it deepens, and it carries peace with it. Urgency exists because time does not pause for reflection later. Death never sends warnings. It arrives when it chooses, and decisions made in panic rarely reflect conviction. That is why clarity now matters. Preparation now matters. Alignment now matters. Let conviction move from thought to action. Let it reshape conversations. Let it inform decisions before emotion clouds judgment. This is how faith stays intact under pressure. This is how peace is preserved when loss arrives. God does not ask you to carry the weight of the world. He asks you to carry obedience. And obedience carried today prevents regret tomorrow. It keeps the conscience clear. It strengthens trust. It steadies the heart when grief comes knocking. This message is not meant to burden you. It is meant to free you from confusion, from hesitation, from compromise disguised as compassion. Truth clarifies. And once clarity comes, the soul breathes easier when it responds. Stand in what is right, not because it is easy, because it is true. Let your faith be complete. Let it reach every boundary, even the final one. When alignment is chosen fully, peace follows deeply, and that peace does not fade. It endures. Peace that endures is not accidental. It is the result of choosing truth when it still costs something. When the noise fades and the crowd moves on, what remains is the quiet certainty of having stood where God stands. That certainty is rare. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be performed. It is earned through alignment, one decision at a time. This is where belief becomes unshakable, not because nothing goes wrong, but because the foundation is correct. Storms test structures, not intentions. And when the structure is built on obedience, it holds. Even grief cannot collapse it. Even loss cannot weaken it. Because the soul knows it honored God fully, without editing his will to fit comfort. Many people live with hidden unrest, a low hum of doubt they cannot name. They pray yet feel distant. They believe yet feel unsure. Often that unrest is not from unanswered prayers, but from unaddressed obedience. The heart knows when something is misaligned, and until it is corrected, peace remains partial. God's design is not harsh. It is precise. Precision protects what matters most. When instructions are followed completely, faith becomes clean, uncomplicated, free from the mental gymnastics of justification. That freedom is powerful. It restores confidence before God and steadies the heart in moments when strength is needed most. This is not about obsessing over rules. It is about honoring authority, recognizing that God sees what humans overlook, that his wisdom accounts for outcomes we cannot predict. When his order is followed, even death becomes an act of worship rather than confusion. The body, returned as commanded, becomes a silent testimony. It speaks without words. It declares submission. It affirms belief. It confirms that faith was not theoretical. It was lived fully, consistently, without shortcuts. That kind of faith shapes the living. It teaches without lecturing. It corrects without shaming. It leaves a legacy stronger than memory. People may forget sermons. They do not forget conviction lived out to the end. This is why hesitation must end. Not with pressure, but with resolve. Resolve to align now while clarity is present, while the heart is steady, while choices can still be made with intention rather than urgency. Waiting feels safe, but it quietly steals courage. Action restores it. Let truth become practice. Let conviction inform planning. Let obedience move from belief into preparation. This is how faith matures. This is how peace becomes permanent rather than temporary. God does not demand that you understand everything. He asks that you trust what He has revealed. That trust deepens the soul. It removes fear. It replaces confusion with direction, and direction brings rest. Even in a restless world, there is strength in choosing differently, strength in standing firm, strength in honoring God when no one else is paying attention. That strength is not loud, it is steady, and it carries you through moments when emotion fails. The path of obedience is narrow, but it is clear. It does not twist with opinion. It does not bend with pressure. It remains firm because truth does not change. When you align with it fully, you stop chasing reassurance. You begin walking with confidence. This is where the journey settles into purpose. Not anxiety, not debate. Purpose, knowing that your faith is whole, that it reaches every boundary. It does not stop where it becomes uncomfortable. Choose that wholeness. Choose that peace. Choose alignment without delay. Because when life ends and silence follows, the choices made now will speak louder than anything ever said. And standing before God with a clear conscience is a peace nothing else can replace.